Hello and welcome back to Deep Sleep Creep's YouTube channel. Today we're going to be listening to 3 more horror stories. If you enjoyed listening to it, please consider commenting and subscribing. So get comfortable and let's begin. The first day of my senior year at high school started like any other. I was the kind of guy who preferred blending into the background, avoiding the spotlight, and keeping my circle of friends small. I was mostly thinking about the football season and how excited I was to hopefully get a scholarship to my dream college. I know it is very strange for a football player to be introverted, but that's the type of person I am, and people around me just had to deal with it. All in all, I loved the sport. But that day, everything changed when a new student walked into my classroom. His name was Lucas, and he had an unsettling intensity about him. He was tall, with jet black hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to lock onto mine as soon as he entered the room. He introduced himself to the class and took a seat right behind me, much closer than the empty desks available. I was initially flattered that someone wanted to befriend me. Lucas was charismatic, charming even. He struck up conversations about shared interests and quickly suggested that we exchange Snapchat usernames. I agreed, thinking it was just a normal way of making friends. At first, I dismissed the nagging feeling that something was off. I kept my big head and sometimes my egotistical tendencies in check. Maybe Lucas was just overly friendly or socially awkward. But as the days turned into weeks, his behavior grew increasingly invasive. He started showing up wherever I went, from the library to the cafeteria. I'd turn around, and there he'd be, that unnerving smile etched onto his face. He began sending me incessant text messages and emails, detailing my daily activities with disturbing accuracy. I felt like I was being watched every moment of the day. My friends noticed the change in my demeanor and my constant unease. They asked what was going on, and I told them. They asked if I had my Snapchat location on because one of them had a similar experience with a crazy ex of his from another school, who was able to follow him thanks to that app. I looked at my settings on the app and sure enough my location was on. I shrugged and switched off my location, hoping it would be the end of that. One evening, as I was heading home after practice, I noticed Lucas following me. He trailed me from a distance, always just out of sight, but I could sense his presence like a shadow lurking in the darkness. Fear gnawed at the edges of my consciousness, and I knew I had to confront him. I confronted Lucas the next day at his locker, asking him why he was so obsessed with me. He made this angry huffing sound like a pig or hog would make as they were about to attack or was angered, and said, "I'm not obsessed with you, you are obsessed with me," and slammed his locker door shut and ran off. I was hoping that was the end of that because I didn't see him for the rest of the day, but I could tell I made him angry. Again, I just shrugged it off and continued my day. One evening, after a grueling football practice, I headed to the locker room to change. I was exhausted, and my buddies and I were talking about the football season and practice. They left one by one, but I stayed behind because I was talking to this cute girl at the time and wanted to shamelessly take shirtless photos of myself without people around. I know, don't judge me. It's not something I'm proud of, but in my defense, she was a really cute girl. As I was in the bathroom taking the photos, I heard the locker room door open and shut. Thinking it was one of my teammates or coach, I hurried and put on my shirt, only to walk out and be met with Lucas. He was standing between me and the doorway. His eyes were filled with sinister hatred determination as he was holding a bat. I was stunned at what I saw. Fear gripped me, but my swift football reflexes kicked in. I managed to get him out of the way when I pushed my football bag in his face and made a run for the door. He tried to grab me, but I managed to evade his grip and escape. I ran one way, and I looked behind me and noticed Lucas ran the other way as I picked up my phone to call the police. The police did a thorough investigation and were able to look at the security cameras the school had outside and saw Lucas did in fact come into the locker rooms with a bat. That was enough for the police to confirm that he did have malicious intent. The next day, the school principal called me into his office. That's when I learned about Lucas's disturbing stalking history, which included multiple expulsions from other schools. The police had arrested Lucas and charged him thanks to the overwhelming emails and text messages I saved along with the security cameras. Lucas was permanently expelled from my high school, which was a sigh of relief for me. I genuinely hope he gets the help that he needs and that we never have to meet again. From that day forward, I kept my online presence more private and never let my guard down, even in the locker rooms. I had always been the shy, introverted type, so transferring to a new high school was never something I looked forward to. Leaving behind my old friends, familiar hallways and trusted teachers was tough, but my family's move made it inevitable. I'd rather not get into why. Anyway, on my first day of high school, being a sophomore, I was crazy nervous. The school was massive, with towering red brick walls and endless corridors that seemed designed to get even the most confident students lost. It was rumored to be an old mansion, converted into a school decades ago. Meanwhile, it just looked like a prison to me. As I navigated the hallways with my class schedule clutched tightly in hand, a feeling of unease settled over me. My footsteps echoed loudly against the cold, polished floors. Every corner I turned seemed to lead to another dimly lit corridor, devoid of any signs of life, which I thought was strange for a high school. But then I shrugged it off, thinking maybe this was the type of high school where some hallways just aren't used. During lunchtime, I decided to approach a group of students sitting at a corner table. They appeared friendly enough, but their smiles seemed forced, as if they didn't want to talk to me, but had to be polite. They welcomed me with open arms, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were a bit too eager to have me there. In the days that followed, strange occurrences became a daily routine. Whispers in the hallways, doors slamming shut when no one was nearby, and chilling drafts in empty classrooms. I chalked it up to my imagination, thinking that the unfamiliar surroundings and the stress of starting over were playing tricks on me. One evening, while studying in the library, I met Sarah, a fellow student who had transferred not too long before I did. She seemed different, her eyes haunted by something I couldn't quite grasp. She told me about the school's dark history. This high school was built on the site of an old mansion, and it was said that a terrible tragedy occurred there many years ago. The original mansion burned down under mysterious circumstances, and the school was built on it. Sarah claimed to have heard ghostly whispers and seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners. She believed the mansion's tormented spirits still roamed the hallways, forever trapped in a world they couldn't escape. I laughed it off at first, but as days turned into weeks, I couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. Which I know in hindsight it's very strange to say, but I guess it was one of those things where you had to be there in that building to understand what I was talking about. Those friends at the table I met earlier wanted to hang out with me one night and said we had to meet at the school. I thought, okay, cool. I'm new and I'm already making friends and hanging out with people. I thought it was awesome. Until that night when I met them at the school, they all smiled at me. I felt really uneasy as they held their flashlights to their faces and said if I wanted to be a part of their crew, I needed to sneak into the basement and take something from it and bring it back. They said all new friends do this ritual to show how badly they wanted to be a part of the friend group. I rolled my eyes, thinking whatever, I'll do it, despite it being really dumb. Armed with a flashlight, I used the keys my friends gave me to break into the school. Apparently one of them was being friendly to the janitor and was able to grab the keys. I walked in through the front door and found the basement and descended down the dimly lit and creaky staircase. What I saw in that basement would haunt me forever. I'm sure I was as white as a ghost. There were crumbling walls covered in eerie symbols, ancient books filled with incantations, and a strange altar adorned with flickering candles. The air grew colder, and I heard voices, distant but unmistakable. Whispers in a language I couldn't comprehend. As I turned to flee, a shadowy figure blocked my path, its eyes burning with malevolent energy. I felt an icy hand clutch my arm, and terror washed over me like a tidal wave. I closed my eyes and screamed. I ran up the stairs with my heart racing and bolted out the front doors. I tried to find my friends, but they weren't there. I looked around and they were nowhere in sight. Sons of bitches, I thought to myself. I stopped to catch my breath and looked behind me at the school. Nothing. It seemed like an ordinary school from out here, but I didn't want to be there any longer, so I decided to jog home and drop the keys on the way, because I didn't care anymore. I just wanted out of this school. From that day on, I avoided the basement and the corner table in the lunchroom. I had heard enough ghost stories to know that some places are best left avoided. This high school had secrets, and I was determined to survive the school year without uncovering any more of them. But the feeling that something was watching me, something ancient and malevolent, never truly went away. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning when our biology teacher, we're going to call her Mrs. Harris, announced a field trip to the nearby Pinecrest Park. We were going to explore the park's diverse nature, applying what we had learned in class about native plant species and wildlife. At the time, it sounded like an enjoyable escape from the monotony of textbooks and classroom lectures. So we were all pretty excited. A week later, our class gathered at the park entrance, equipped with field guides, notebooks, and other school stuff. Pinecrest Park was a beautiful place, with towering oaks and winding trails, but it was known for its dense undergrowth and the stories of strange occurrences that happened deep within its woods. We dismissed the tales as superstitions and ventured in, excited about the adventure that awaited us. Mrs. Harris gave us a brief overview of the plant species we were expected to find and encouraged us to explore the park in small groups. My friends, Alex, Sarah and I, decided to stick together and venture off to see what other plants we could match in our field guide. As we wandered deeper into the woods, the atmosphere began to change. The sun-dappled path grew dimmer, and the chirping of birds was replaced by an eerie silence. That's when we heard it, a distant, haunting melody that seemed to emanate from deep within the forest. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, a tune that sent shivers down my spine. Sarah, always the fearless one, suggested we follow the sound to its source. It seemed like a bad idea, but at the same time I didn't want to seem scared. Plus an adventure and an opportunity to find out what the haunting music was did sound exciting. Alex hesitated but eventually agreed, and we pressed on, tracing the strange melody as it led us deeper into the woods. The further we ventured, the denser the underbrush became, and the melody grew louder, which made us even more excited. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through my veins. We came to a small clearing bathed in an eerie blue light, and there in the center stood a solitary tree unlike any I'd seen before. The tree was ancient, its gnarled branches twisted and contorted into grotesque shapes. Its bark was a sickly shade of grey, and its leaves, if you could call them that, were pale and almost translucent. But what held our attention was the source of the haunting melody, a small porcelain music box hanging from one of the tree's branches, swaying gently in the breeze. We approached the tree cautiously, our eyes locked on the music box. Sarah reached out to touch it, her fingers trembling, but before she could make contact, the melody abruptly ceased, and the box fell silent. At that very moment, the woods seemed to come alive with an unsettling energy. The branches of the twisted tree began to writhe and contort. The ground beneath our feet trembled, and an otherworldly wind whispered through the leaves. We started to panic and tried to run back, but the once clear path we had followed was now a maze of thorns and brambles, trapping us in the clearing. As we struggled to break free, the music box began to play again, its notes more discordant and dissonant than before. We all thought we saw shadow figures, but needed to focus on one thing, and that mission was to get the hell out of here. With a surge of adrenaline, we broke free from the thorny trap and ran back the way we had came. The haunting melody chased us, growing louder and more sinister with every step. It was as though the forest itself was trying to ensnare us in its evil grip. We finally burst out of the woods, gasping for breath, and found ourselves back at the park entrance. Mrs. Harris was waiting, her face etched with worry. She had heard the music too, and the fear in her eyes mirrored our own. We told her everything, from the music box to the ghostly figures. She listened intently, and then, with a grave expression, led us back to the bus. We never spoke of that day again, and Pinecrest Park was never mentioned in class. Years have passed, but the memory of that haunting melody and the twisted tree still haunts my dreams. I often wonder what's there in the forest holds, and if we had ventured further, would we have discovered more than we ever wanted to know? Pinecrest Park remains a place of mystery and dread, a reminder that some mysteries are best left unsolved, and some melodies are better left unheard.